Easter is almost upon us, and you know what that means. Adorable bunnies and cute little carrots and decor that's so charming and sweet. Awesome. Today we're going to create simple Easter decorations that are going to be adorable, charming, not cheesy, and will be the perfect additions to your spring decorating.
For this first DIY, you're just going to need a plain wooden canvas. I often get mine from Dollarama, but if you don't have a Dollarama near you, no big deal. You can often find these at just about any craft store. Now, although there's nothing unattractive about this lighter colored wood, I think I want to go in a bit darker. So we're going to go in with a little bit of Art Mind's antiquing wax, and I'm just going to apply a really nice thick coat to this, making the entire wood frame that nice, rich, dark brown color. And then set this aside and let it rest and dry for at least a day. Now I created this sign on Canva and then downloaded it, uploaded it onto my Cricut, and then let my Cricut machine do its magic. Then once the Cricut had cut out the vinyl, I just carefully weeded out the sign, leaving only behind the vinyl adhesive that I wanted. Then using a little bit of sizer transfer tape, I peeled that off of its backing, applied it to the front of the vinyl, and then using my Cricut scraper, I made sure that I burnished that really well both on the front and the back so that all the lettering and the egg stayed in place. I'm applying this to wood, so technically you probably should be doing this with heat transfer vinyl, but I'm just going to lay this out carefully with this permanent vinyl. I let the paint rest and dry for about 2 days before I applied this, and I think it's going to work fine, and honestly it didn't cost that much. I'm not that attached to it. If something happens to it, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Et voila, what do you think? Okay, for this next DIY, you're going to want a wooden bunny cutout and some craft paper. I had this wonderful collection of craft paper, and in it was this beautiful rose pattern, and I decided this was the paper that would do the bunny justice. To adhere this beautiful rose paper to the wooden bunny, we're just going to go in with a little bit of Mod Podge. Now we're going to do both sides of the bunny, but we're going to do them one at a time. So for each side, you're going to want to start by using a paintbrush and just applying that Mod Podge with a nice thin coat. Then you're going to want to lay that paper down nice and flat. Sometimes I use my Cricut scraper just to smooth out all of the paper, make sure that there's no wrinkles, and then just let that sit and dry for just a little bit until that glue solidifies. Next, go in with a pair of scissors and just sort of cut that paper down so that you end up with a little less paper to work around, and then also use that pair of scissors to cut into any areas where maybe there might be an indent, such as around the neck, in the ears, around the paws, those sort of areas where it will be easier to remove the paper by having the slit in place. The easiest and best way to get a nice crisp edge when you're Mod Podging on an object is to go in with either some sandpaper, or personally, I like to just buy some nail files, some inexpensive nail files from Dollar Tree, and use those. Then once you've removed all the paper from the edges and you have the perfect cute little bunny rabbit, you want to flip it over and do the exact same thing to the other side. Next, you want to go in with a little bit more of that Mod Podge. I decided to go with a matte Mod Podge, but you could use a glossy one if you prefer. And I just put on a nice thin coat on top of all of the paper, making sure that everything is covered and laying down flatly. The Mod Podge had dried completely. I just went in with a little eye hook and attached that into the back of the bunny. Okay, full disclosure, I had to have my son twist it in a little bit to get it started, and then I finished the rest. With that eye hook in place, next just go in with a bunch of twine. I mean, you want to take a lot of twine. You want way more than you think you're going to need, and you're going to see why at the end. You're going to want to start by tying that twine to the eye hook, then using a variety of wooden beads. Now, I have beads that are from Amazon, but I also have a ton of beads that are just from Dollar Tree, and you can use those as well. And I didn't use any rhyme or reason for this. I just strung on the beads one by one. I also had these wooden carrots left over from another DIY, and I decided to add these as well because I think that they just add a nice little whimsical touch. Now, once you've strung on those beads, and if you have them, some wooden embellishments, you'll be left with a ton of twine. Wrap that twine around your hand over and over and over again, looping it until you used up all of the twine. Then slide your hand out so that you just end up with the loop of twine, and then you're going to want to take a smaller piece of twine, but make sure that the piece is still long enough that you end up with quite a length of tail that you can wrap around the bottom part of the looped twine. I hope that makes sense. We're making a tassel. If you haven't figured it out yet, we're making a tassel. And tie that around sort of the bottom part of your twine loops so that it is tightly held securely in place. Hot glue any loose ends into place, trim off the bottom, and then use your scissors to cut the tops of the loops so that you end up with fringe. And there you have it, the most charming bunny decor accessory. Okay, for these next two Easter DIYs, you're going to need 3 of Dollar Tree's burlap picture frames. And for 2 of these frames, you're going to want to go onto Canva on their free account, find yourself 2 Easter bunnies that you like, print those out onto paper, and then cut them out. I had my Cricut machine cut out mine. Basically, you're making homemade stencils. And you're going to want these stencils to be almost the size of the entire canvas. Now, you could, of course, use any colored chalk paint you want, but I love me a little milk jug chalk paint, so that's what I'm going to use for this DIY. And using a regular size stenciling brush, you're just going to want to pounce that milk jug or whatever color you use, that chalk paint, onto your canvas so that you end up with the stencil shape. Now, I didn't go for perfection with this. I went for a lighter hand. I didn't fill out the entire area. I sort of worked out where I thought maybe there might be some shading, some shapes, and kind of went with a very distressed look. And then I went ahead and did the same on the other canvas with the other bunny, and I made sure that these bunnies were facing each other and that they weren't identical. Okay, rather than showing you the finished look, I'm going to show you the next DIY, and then I'm going to show you all the finished looks together. For the third canvas, I went in with this spare cloth that I had. It had beautiful detailing along the top. I used this in another DIY. I believe it was also in my spring DIY video. And I just wrapped this around to the back, cut out enough so that it would fit properly, hot glued it into place, and then just tucked in some faux lavender from Dollar Tree, and voila! For this super easy Easter DIY, you're just going to want a wicker basket. I found this one at the thrift store back in fall, and I just went into my Easter stash and grabbed a bunch of different things that I thought would look nice in this basket. So I'm going to start by sticking a little scarf that I had, and then on top of that I'm going to add this old sweater of mine. It's off-white in color. It's a nice sweater, but there's a little hole in the armpit, so I'm not going to be wearing that anymore. And so I'm just going to spread that out, tucking in the sleeves and the turtleneck so that it looks like a wool blanket hanging out of the basket when nobody needs to know it was an old sweater. Now to that I added some fabric and decorative burlap covered carrots that I made in my spring DIY video that I will link right here above. I also added this oversized plastic egg that I had used Mod Podge and an old book to cover. This was a DIY from my blog a couple of years ago. Next I added some shabby chic eggs that I'd made for the blog a couple of years ago using old pieces of books and some decorative ribbon. I followed these up with a few plastic eggs that I had hot glued twine to. Added to this a cute little bunny that I had painted gray and then whitewashed so that the details stuck out. Again, this is another DIY that I did for my blog several years ago. And a few more plastic eggs that I had painted off white and then spackled with a bit of brown chalk paint to make them look like actual real eggs. And then to finish everything off, I just threw in a few little wicker balls that I had purchased from the dollar store several years ago. And there you go, a simple basket using supplies that I had at home, but are also things that you could easily make yourself.
Well, that's it for today's Easter decor DIYs. If you enjoyed that, make sure you subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. If you hit the notification bell, it'll let you know the next time I upload. Oh, and you might enjoy these.